Who can stand against the might of Zargon the Returner? Surely, no man is strong enough of courage and skill to face my master in combat. No god would dare confront him, for he has brought low others before. Nay, when Zargon awakens, all shall tremble as the world is born anew in his foul image. He is the true epicure in the terrible, to whom a new thrill of unutterable ghastliness is the chief end and justification of existence. Zargon, the Returner, also called the Invincible Tyrant, is said to be an undying and unkillable evil. Some stories claim Zargon was the original master of the 9 hells. Others claim him to be a powerful demon prince exiled from the abyss. Perhaps neither of these stories are true, but it can surely be said that Zargon is a power that inspires madness and terror. Despised by the Batezu, feared by the gods, and all but forgotten by mortals, Zargon the Returner struggles to escape his prison to once more conquer the earth and drown the world with rivers of his slime. Many centuries ago, a mighty kingdom named Sinidicea stood in the heart of a massive and trackless wasteland. It reclaimed the land from the desert, transforming it into fertile farmland. The people prospered, and the nation achieved great advances in magic, science, and technology. As with all cultures, it didn't last. The kingdom's success bred complacency and decadence, and the population plunged itself into excess. This laxity enabled a bloodthirsty cult to come to power and perform unspeakable sacrifices to their dark god, Zargon. For years, the kingdom declined, languishing under the yoke of oppression, until a great barbarian horde smashed the nation, slaughtered the people, and scattered them across the lands. Though barbarians needed little provocation to attack soft cities, the army attacking the kingdom had long suffered depredations at the hands of the cultists. The cult of Zargon needed human sacrifices to feed its god, and when its members exhausted themselves of non-believers and criminals from their own people, they enslaved others for this purpose. A charismatic barbarian leader named Zankar gathered the tribes and sacked the city, having lost too many of his kinsmen to the madmen of Sinidicea. The tribal leader made a terrifying discovery when his horde tore through the nation's capital city. The god they worshipped was no otherworldly being. It was a terrifying monster that lorded over them all, demanding appalling sacrifices to appease its dreadful hunger. The streets were slick with blood and a disgusting slime. Zankar realized the only way he could preserve his own people would be to destroy the beast god, and so he fought the monster for 7 days and nights. Although considered one of the greatest warriors in the land, he could not kill the beast. As soon as he struck a blow, Zargon's wounds would heal. Zankar grew weary, giving the monster the opportunity it needed. Within moments, the climactic duel came to a sudden and bloody end. The gods blessed Zankar, but their champion failed. The gods themselves came to the earth to punish the kingdom and put Zargon to rest. When they appeared, the elder evil mocked them. Zargon slew some of them and drove off the rest. Survivors of the barbarian invasion witnessed Zargon's might and feared the world would end, so they fled into the caves beneath their city. Zargon seemed unstoppable, but he had one foe remaining. Eons earlier, Zargon had ruled the 9 hells of Bator as father of the ancient Batorians, a long-extinct race that preceded the Batezu. His kingdom was a terrifying place, filled with running slime and rampant evil. When Asmodeus and his allies seized the 9 hells, they purged the plane of the Batorians, enslaving them and destroying their lords. Asmodeus butchered most himself, but Zargon was resilient to the worst attacks. Asmodeus discovered he could kill the flesh of the beast, but not the horn, so he tore it from Zargon's head and flung the hateful spur out of the hells and to the material plane, where it pierced deep into the earth. Driven from the 9 hells, Zargon's flesh reformed around his horn, and he turned his attention to the material plane. It took centuries, but he crawled up from the depths of the earth and set upon the soft mortals dwelling in the kingdom above. To spare themselves extinction, the people of the kingdom raised up Zargon as their god and fed him endless sacrifices to appease his need to kill. Although the death of the gods did not distress Asmodeus in the least, the freedom of this elder evil did. Asmodeus stepped in to stop Zargon for the last time. Since the Lord of Nessus was not a god, he was not vulnerable to the worst of Zargon's powers. Still, he knew he could not slay the beast. Instead, he imprisoned the elder evil in solid stone, so only the horn was visible. He then turned to Zargon's Synodician worshippers, burying them alive in the tunnels. Scribes, readers of all sorts, it is thy indefatigable lantern-bearer, Volothamp Gedarm, here to relate the tragedy of Synodicea, the whispering wastes of Rarain, and the impertinent persistence of an elder evil hurled from the 9 hells. Prepare thy palate. This vintage is rich with dust, scented candles, and devilish wine. Volo's Guide to the Elder Evils. Zargon, the black-horned hunger. When Asmodeus flung Zargon from the 9 hells, the elder evil fell upon lands destined to become the heart of the Imascari Empire. Time passed, and their empire rose where the calamity slept. Over the very crater of that fall, one small city blossomed over the very site of Zargon's fall, Synodicea. As the Imascari age ripened and rotted, if you would like to be specific, a cult of Zargon wormed its way from cellar to scepter. In the inevitable purges that accompany such promotions, even the beast's former attendants were slain, their devotion devouring themselves to prove themselves to the fallen evil. If Zargon should return, he would raise up the madmen who live in the lost city and form an army to create a new Imascar empire in his image. Chapter 2. The Fall of Synodicea and the Ziggurat. Centuries ago, Synodicea was jewel and granary both, a capital of a rich and fertile kingdom, reclaiming the desert by dint of canals and stubbornness, most of all under King Alexander, last and greatest of its line. Upon his death, the people raised a pyramid so vast it taught the horizon manners. This pyramid was the largest and most important building in the city. Digging beneath that pyramid, workers broke into a lair and woke a strange monster, Zargon, roughly humanoid in silhouette, yet larger, all great tentacles where its limbs ought to be, crowned with a giant lizard's head and a single black horn jutting from the middle of its forehead. Zargon feasted first on the diggers, then hunted by night through Synodicea's streets. The city guard failed. At last, the city rulers began sending criminals from the jails into the pyramid for Zargon to feed on. In time, after worship followed their fear, a cult declared Zargon divine, and the old gods, Gorm, Usamegaris, and Madarua, were forsaken in favor of the monster. The worshippers of Zargon began to look for strange pleasures. Decadence bloomed. Rare wines, bizarre drugs, and entertainments that mistake forgetting for joy. The people now sought oblivion in these luxuries. Irrigation ditches were silted, left to falter into disrepair. Rich fields, once used for herbs, were now crisped into the desert. The army, I mind you, a once and proud regiment, mislaid its discipline. In the coming years, as the rebellion gnawed, barbarian hosts at last stormed over the walls and broke the city. The surviving people based their new life around a huge underground lake, fed by channels cut through solid rock. Built in the reign of King Alexander, the lake had been the original city's water supply. On its shores, the people grew mushrooms and other edible fungi. They built houses out of stone from the ruins above and expanded underground. The new city was smaller than the ancient capital, but it was safer because it was hidden beneath the desert sands. Although this new city outlasted the original city, and Synodicea was lost in the vastness of the desert. As time passed, dear reader, certain recent accounts of the ancient city were lost. However, as your humble guide often does, I pondered and gathered what more I could on the lost city. Please note, for a full current recount, your best source may be the scribe Orlando's works from Candlekeep. A favoured friend now lost, but nay, he is not forgotten. Hidden in the Valley of Death are the ruins of Sinidicea. Little remains of the city, and if not for the imposing ziggurat in the centre of the ruins, one might overlook the few exposed stone blocks and crumbling walls. In spite of the site's condition, the ziggurat is more or less intact. Its walls have crumbled somewhat, and a few breaches reach to the dark secrets within. But the massive structure stands defiant of time and the harsh terrain. The ziggurat is a stepped pyramid, with each level rising 20 feet high. Sand conceals most of the bottom tier. Mounted on the top of the ziggurat are 3 statues. One depicts a strong, bearded man holding a balance and a javelin. Another depicts a winged child with 2 snakes wrapped around its body. And the third is of a beautiful woman. Over the centuries, the wind has erased all the statues' fine detail. Beneath the ruins of Sinidicea lies an underground city in a vast cavern. By the time survivors fled here from their broken capital, the cultists of Zargon had already begun constructing the city and thriving in its darkness. In exchange for food, housing, and a modicum of protection, Zargon's priests demanded absolute obedience, which they received for a time. The Sinidicians silently endured for decades as Zargonites plucked living sacrifices from their ranks to appease their voracious overlord. However, decades of growing horrors had finally primed the people for rebellion. A deep freshwater lake lies in the center of the city, just beyond Zargon's polluting influence. The lake provides cool, clean water and fish, which it has aplenty, to the populace. The Sinidicians also breed underground livestock, giant rodents, cave lizards, and the occasional carrion crawler. Sinidicians farm edible fungi in mildewy fields forested with mushrooms. Myconids roam these dense patches of overgrowth, which are more akin to fungal thickets than cultivated fields. These neighbourly fungi help citizens transcend their dismal existence through communal melds in which they share dreams of a nobler era. Some Sinidicians have grown to prefer these joyful melds over their daily lives, sinking into complacency. The priests of Zargon encourage this behaviour. As long as the melds continue, the people are less likely to object to the cruelty the cult inflicts on them. Outside the city lies a caustic pit known as the Eye of Zargon, a crater with a sickly glow reminiscent of Zargon's cycloptic eye. Zargonites regard the site as sacred and perform rituals to the returner there. One legend states that to truly kill Zargon, its horn must be cast into the pit. But some fear this might be a deliberate misdirection spread by the cult. While most of the city lives in fear of Zargon and its devotees, 3 growing factions, the faithful of Sinidicea's old gods, plot to overthrow the cult of Zargon and restore their former kingdom. Each faction does so alone, as mistrust and long-standing rivalries prevent them from uniting against the cult. Chapter 4. Worshippers of Zargon. They sat on the shore of Sinidicea's Black Lake, among mushrooms, which in Sinidicea were as tall as cottages. 2 rows of pillars, each carved in the likeness of a different past ruler, support the high ceiling of this grand entrance hall. A breathtaking mosaic spans the walls, depicting the rise and fall of an ancient civilization. A thin layer of sand coats the floor. It grows thicker near the 2 enormous stone doors on the north wall. 2 spoked platforms stand beside the doors. 2 high voices of Zargon's cult stood in front of the mosaic and spoke. I present them to you, dear reader, as Vanessa and Dawn. Vanessa spent her entire life hiding her tiefling heritage, wearing heavy clothing to conceal the dark markings speckling the skin of her arms and chest. As she descended into profligacy, she now exults in the strangeness her fiendish blood grants her. She has long black hair and dark circles under her eyes. The black spots on her skin move as though a creature were writhing beneath her flesh. Her ears are slightly pointed, upswept, and pierced a dozen times each. Let me speak of Dawn. Dawn was a Synodician and has spent much of his life without ever seeing the sun. He is pale, with almost translucent skin. His hair is blonde, bordering on white, and he has no pigment in his eyes, giving them a red cast. When they took me, I wept for 7 days. I tried to escape, tried to flee, but each time they pulled me back. I realized perhaps I was supposed to be here, supposed to learn from these people, and learn I did, spoke Vanessa. Vanessa then opened up about herself to Dawn. As an expert on dead gods, Vanessa had traveled the world recovering samples from lost religions to understand the cultures behind them. Her career came to an abrupt end when she sought the lost city. What she learned from the masked inhabitants of the madhouse destroyed her respect for the gods, setting a new course for her as a priestess of Zargon. Vanessa's time with the cult altered her personality, as tears slightly crept down her cheek as she looked upward at Dawn. Her tale recounted that, instead of the detached archaeologist she once was, she is a wanton hedonist, obsessed with pleasure, and dulling her senses by sampling the bizarre drugs used by the Synodicians. She craves the oblivion that intoxication brings and fears she has reached the limits of what these strange people can offer her. She then spoke of the Synodicians. The Synodicians embrace lifestyles of twisted decadence to distract themselves from their abject misery. Every citizen wears a stylized mask, usually the face of an animal or other creature that embodies the wearer's personality. Some masks are carved from wood or bone, while others are forged from precious metals. Synodicians dress in once lavish clothing that's now faded and frayed. Elaborate jewelry, fashioned from scavenged beads, feathers, and other baubles, complements their torn robes and haunting visages, transforming each citizen into a walking mockery of their once respected people. After years of isolation, some Synodicians have abandoned their identities and adopted strange behaviors based on the faces they wear. Many spoke that a Synodician who wears a feline mask might meow during conversation or purr when pleased, while one who dons a bee mask might devote themselves to making honey, buzzing noisily wherever they go. Vanessa then hesitated, as her left hand moved ever so slightly, a tremor forming as she recounted the next part of her ever so difficult existence. Vanessa spoke of cutting herself and packing the wounds with powders, oozes, and geels. She claimed the pain is exquisite. The wreckage of her flesh testifies to how often she uses these strange drugs. As the smoke fell in embers and dust, Dawn felt composed to share his tale with Vanessa, although a slight smile of madness was ever present within his composed demeanor. I tried to flee my heritage, yet no matter where I went, the only choices I could make were to serve him. I have set aside my childish fears and have resigned myself to whatever end awaits me. Born in the subterranean city of Synodicea, Dawn did everything in his power to escape his homeland, but his past dogged his steps. He swore his life to Duch, only to find that his demonic master sold him to Zargon. Now, with loyalties divided and madness filling his head, he has returned to the place of his birth, where he grimly awaits his destiny. Dawn spoke to Vanessa of wanting to release himself from serving Zargon, but his master has commanded it. He must do as he was bidden, so he returned to the lost city and the madness of his people. Soon after arriving, he met Vanessa, who convinced him to slay his father and take command of the cult. With the filthy deed done, Dawn went even more insane and secretly murdered his people to quell the rage growing within him. Given the chance, Dawn would slay Zargon himself, but he knew such thoughts too mad to attempt. He carries the weight of Duoblex's corruption. Vanessa then threads a finger along the piercings of her ear, black speckles under her skin shifting, She then leans close enough for Dawn to smell resin and blood powder. She draws a nail across her wrist, winces while smiling. It will sting to hear it. Sit, breathe. Dawn, wishing in some recess of his mind to release him from his torment, nodded ever so slightly towards Vanessa to continue what she knew of their history. In time, the Synodicians adapted to their new surroundings. Succeeding generations were born with white hair, pale skin, and eyes unaccustomed to the light of the sun. They spent their lives tending fields of gigantic mushrooms and herding subterranean beasts. To keep the population of this underground city under control, the priests of Zargon poisoned the water with a powerful sedative known as the elixir of fantasy. Thus, while away from their fields, most of the Synodicians passed their time in a dreamlike state. Only the tiny sects of Gorm, Usamigarus, and Madarua escaped this fate. Cloistered in the side passages and caverns around the underworld city, the faithful of the old gods plotted to overthrow Zargon and his priests. Mistrust and ancient rivalries prevented the rebels from uniting to face the Zargonites until a pair of powerful heroes from the outside, Almir of Glantry and the warrior thief Barnabas Bladecutter, delved into the city. They led the people in an uprising and defeated Zargon himself. Believing their duty completed, the adventurers departed the city for the vast reaches of Norworld and were never heard from again. Unknown to them, however, Zargon had not been permanently destroyed. Within weeks of his defeat, he appeared again to take his revenge. Rallying his surviving followers, he waged a bloody war known as the Time of Rage. Zargon's troops struck hard and fast, overwhelming the rebels in the underground city before they could cure all the citizens of the poison that produced their dreamlike state. The clerics of Gorm, Usamigaras, and Madarua fled for their lives, although recent reports are that they have since returned. Perhaps twisted, or perhaps they still wish to reclaim it. Gentles. Thus, thy indefatigable lantern-bearer, Volothamp Gedam, caps his lamp off for the night and leaves the masked avenues of Synodicea behind. If I may scribes, I would recount this passage from none other than Alando the Seer, the true epicure in the terrible, to whom a new thrill of unutterable ghastliness is the chief end and justification of existence. For the non-poet, let me explain this in terms of Zargon. Zargon is a true connoisseur of horror who exists for the next unspeakably ghastly thrill. And to that I say, sod off. And if you may, subscribe to the Scribe of Candlekeep, Lawbrary, for more tales such as this.